Hello, this is Ewan Holmes, transitional minister at Westminster Presbyterian Church in Bay City, Michigan. And this is our midweek chat that we've started during the COVID-19 experience. But we're going to continue it. Last Sunday, I was preaching about the fact that we need to be part of a village, for it takes a village to raise children, but it also takes a village to sustain one another and support each other. After that service, I went back to my apartment and I listened to the Moth Radio Hour, which is a habit of mine on Sunday evenings. And I heard the perfect story that I wish I had heard earlier to convey to you. But let me share the story about Maxie Jones. Maxie, on February 1st, 1978, started his second semester of his sophomore year of high school. On February 2nd, 1978, Maxie arose to find his mother, who he dearly loved, dead from natural causes. She died in her sleep. You can only imagine how that threw him for a loop, to say the least. He was devastated. He was in mourning. He was asking questions. He was grieving deeply. He didn't get back to school for a couple of weeks. But when he went back, he really didn't want to be there. The only reason he had gone to school in the first place was because of his mother, and now that she was gone, he wondered, why do I need to be here? He was just going through the motions. One of his classes, an English class, had Mr. Goldberg teaching, and Mr. Goldberg would teach by asking questions of his students. And whenever he would ask Maxie a question, Maxie would sort of come out of his fog and go, what was the question? Mr. Goldberg would repeat it, and Maxie would give the correct answer. This happened several times. So Mr. Goldberg asked Maxie to come to his office one day, and they sat down and talked. Maxie told Mr. Goldberg about his mother's death and about the fact that he really didn't want to be in school anyway. Mr. Goldberg made Maxie promise that he would come to his office every day during sixth period. And Maxie would do that. Sometimes they would sit and talk. Sometimes he would help Mr. Goldberg with papers. Sometimes he'd clean the office up. Sometimes they would just read in silence. But every day they were there together at sixth period. When it came time for a parent-teacher conference, Maxie's sister went in to talk to his teachers. The social studies teacher knew her and knew that she had just graduated from high school the year before, and he said, "What are you trying to do? I'm not going to talk to you." Mr. Goldberg overheard this and went to the teacher and explained the situation and said, "You need to talk to her." So he did. But then Mr. Goldberg went to every other teacher of Maxie's, told them the story, and said, "If you have any concerns, if anything comes up about Maxie, come to me first." And so that's how they proceeded. Maxie met with Mr. Goldberg every day through the rest of his sophomore year. And he found himself a little surprised when he looked back and saw that he hadn't missed one day of school. In his junior year, Mr. Goldberg came to him and said, "Maxie, we still have an agreement. Come into my office at sixth period. And so they continued this through his junior year and then through his senior year. Maxie was about to graduate. He had on his cap and gown. And he looked over and he happened to see Mr. Goldberg there for graduation. And he goes, "Hey, Mr. Goldberg, what are you doing here?" And Mr. Goldberg said, "Well, it's a surprise to me too, in a sense, because, Maxie, I've never been to graduation. I teach 10th graders. But there wasn't going to be anything that would stop me from coming and seeing you graduate." Maxie Jones graduated with honors and went on to lead a productive life. But it wasn't until several years later that he came to realize what Mr. Goldberg had done for him. He made Maxie feel important. Maxie got up every morning wanting to go to school because someone expected to see him, Mr. Goldberg. They have continued their relationship over all these years. Maxie is in his 50s now, but he always makes a point of seeing Mr. Goldberg for coffee once a week. Friends, we know the term, "it takes a village." We understand the concept, and we agree with it intellectually. But on a more personal, a more spiritual level, it does take a village. And you are not only the recipient of all of those people that make up that village, but you are also part of that village that reaches out. So I ask you today to consider that. It may be a young person that you have a relationship with. It may be somebody older, a young adult, or even adult, that you have a relationship with. But it still takes a village, and they still need you, and you need them. So with that in mind, enjoy the fact that even in these moments when we struggle with what's going on around us, we have a village that cares for us, that loves us, that embraces us, and that honors us. And may the peace of Christ be with you. Amen.